Overwatch 2 is a great game, but it can be a buggy game. And can also be a very frustrating game with the number of quality of life changes that just seem to be totally lacking for a lot of different characters. I had a project decision a long time ago to take the time to actually sit down with a lot of people that play those different characters and make a video about one bug fix or one quality of life change for each hero. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to break the rules a lot. Not only am I going to be sneaking in a couple of bug fixes for a couple different characters, but I also might be including a couple of buffs or nerfs. You see, the line between what is a quality of life change and what is a bug fix can be pretty blurry. In fact, the line between what is a quality of life change and what is an actual balance change is even blurrier. And so a lot of these changes are going to intrude more on balance, although I'm going to try and avoid that as best as I can. And I'm definitely going to break the rule in a few instances, so bear with me. In addition to that, I generally try to avoid some of the physics and map design issues when it comes to quality of life, because that's a little bit outside of my pay grade. I'm not as familiar with those. I'm also not fully educated on every nuance for every character, so if you think I missed any, or maybe I miscommunicated some of these bugs or quality of life changes, please let me know in the comments. And also, if you just flat out disagree, if you think, oh, that's nice, but this bug or this quality of life fix would be even nicer for this character, then let me know in the comments. So I guess really quick, what do we qualify as a quality of life change? Bug fix feels like it's pretty obvious, right? If it doesn't do what it's supposed to do consistently, that's a bug. But a quality of life change is just simply that maybe a buff, maybe a nerf, or may just not really affect the power of the character at all, but makes a character more enjoyable, more intuitive, and more satisfying to play. And as I said, I'm going to try to stay away from buffs and nerfs, but I'm not going to do so perfectly throughout the rest of the video. In fact, I would say a good 30-40% of these are buffs or nerfs. Some slight, some not so slight, that I just feel like the character would feel a lot better, or playing versus the character would feel a lot better if these things were consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the notes up on screen for each of the roles, and we're going to go through each of the character as best as I possibly can, as consistently as I possibly can. Let's actually start off with D.Va. So this is one that I'm going to start breaking the rules almost immediately, and we're going to talk about a buff for D.Va. One of the biggest problems with D.Va in higher rank play, not just in pro play, but just in higher rank play, is that D.Va Bomb is a pretty inconsistent ultimate when it comes to the tank ultimates. And one of the weaknesses of D.Va Bomb is that it is not just, a reset and get your cooldown back, or get your ultimate back. It's also, it can be very inconsistent when it comes to actually remeching. Because you have to wait for the bomb's detonation before you remech, it can actually be very easy to punish in high-level play. So my quality of life buff for D.Va is to allow her to remech about a second sooner before the bomb finally explodes, allowing for a little bit more flexibility with when you can remech, so you can still make plays with it, but it actually increases D.Va's safety significantly. Again, definitely a net buff, but it was something that I feel this character really needs, not only to feel better as a whole, but to remain relevant in higher rank play when you're competing with ultimates like Orisa Ultimate, Ramattra Ult, Primal Rage, and so on. Okay, now we have got the big one, Doomfist. Now, this is definitely one of the ones where I am not fully qualified to answer every aspect of Doomfist, but the big ones are just this character needs bug fixes. Get Quick Dawn has so many bug fixes that I couldn't even go through the entire video, the number of bugs that he's found, but it seems like from the Doomfist that I've spoken with that the one bug fix that they would trade anything for is more consistent slam. It sounds like the slam from the beta of Overwatch 2 was a lot more consistent when it came to stair slamming. You could turn easier. There's a lot more opportunity, more reach with the stair slam as well, or the old version of slam as well. So there's a lot of things that were different about that original slam. They don't even necessarily need to slow back on slam, but the general consensus was getting back that old version of the slam would be great. I don't know what happened here, but they definitely that was a big contention there. One other tiny little detail as well is when it comes to hinder from Cassidy. I don't feel that should necessarily prevent you from using your ultimate, and that definitely would be a huge quality of life change. Would be a nerf for Cassidy, yes, a buff for Doomfist, but it's, again, one of those things that kind of borders on the line between bug fix, quality of life fix, and buff. We're going to move on to Junkerqueen. Now, this one is definitely going to be some net buffs, okay? First off, one of the requests was, could there possibly be a way that where we could make the ultimate cast 0.1, that's right, 0.1 seconds faster? It's so easy to counter, even with not super great players, because the cast time is almost Dragon Blade level. But the difference between Dragon Blade and this one is that it locks your movement. The only thing you can do actually is pivot. So it makes it very difficult to actually get it off consistently, and it can be very, very easy to counter. One of the other things that people were requesting as well is if there was a way to cancel the ult distance. Again, a net buff, but you pressed Q to use your ultimate, but you could actually press Q so you don't have to go the full distance. One of the downsides of Junkerqueen's ultimate is that it basically sets a lock distance, but if you could selectively use it and cancel it early, almost like a Guardian Angel, or really a lot of movement abilities, that would be a huge quality of life change. Now, I'm not super sure if that's necessary. Maybe it's part of the skill play of the ultimate is having to aim it in the right direction. I agree with that, but the difference between reducing the skill ceiling of a character and making the character feel good to play, it's a pretty blurry line sometimes. Orisa was pretty simple. I think Orisa for right now, there's not a lot of bad quality of life changes. I know people complain a little bit about the Fortify, but I do think that that's something that, for example, if you're playing versus a Roadhog who ults you, being able to cancel Fortify, while sometimes it can be a bit of a mistake, I do think it's important that you're able to cancel it. One thing is, though, I think that Javelin hitbox size is a little bit large, so it's definitely a nerf for this character, but I feel that the hitbox on Javelin should probably be shrunk by a tiny bit. This character is a whole can of worms that I have to make a whole video on at some point. Too strong in some aspects, too weak in other aspects, but I do think the Javelin for the lower cooldown that it is a little bit too easy to land. Roadhog, I don't have anything for Roadhog. I know we're not exactly going alphabetical here, but I figured I'd just mention it. Roadhog, I think with an upcoming rework, I don't really have any thoughts on Roadhog quality of life change. I think we need to wait and see what the rework does. Okay, Ramattra. So Ramattra actually had a lot of stuff. I think that his power spike leans way too heavily into his Nemesis form. I was really disappointed in the Overwatch 2 balance team buffing the cooldown in Nemesis form, nerfing it to 7 seconds instead of 8. I feel like this character really only revolves around Nemesis form. And I think that really is kind of disappointing considering how cool the weapon and some of the abilities function in his other form, Omnic form. And I think one of the reasons why this form sucks is the fact that his projectile, while it does a ton of damage, moves very slowly, and so is almost impossible to hit on moving characters. Now, it's a little bit easier with training bots. Anything that has any sort of 80-80 strafing pattern, any sort of verticality, this weapon feels terrible to land. So one of the biggest things that I think they need to do is they need to increase the speed at which this projectile moves. Now, that will probably need to be compensated by a damage reduction because it's going to be a lot more easy to do a lot of damage. But I think it would be a lot better if there were more ways that I could use this weapon than just shooting the enemy tank or shooting somebody at point blank range. I think that's a huge problem with this character. One of the other things too as well is look at my cooldowns in the bottom right here. When I pop Nemesis form, my shield cooldown disappears. And it's understandable because obviously there are a lot of things in the bottom, but maybe it'd be nice to actually see that the cooldown of my shield at the same time. That one might be tricky, might cause some clutter, but it's something worth mentioning. Also, a couple of things with Vortex. It's super inconsistent in terms of verticality. The verticality reach of Vortex is a lot lower than you think. It really will never reach a flying character. It has a lot of inconsistent interactions with things like Ball's Pile Driver, also Pedal Platform from Lifeweaver, very inconsistent, weird interactions with that. And one of the cool things that, again, net buff here that somebody came up with is what if we were able to apply Vortex while mid-air? So you tap the E again, or in this case, for whatever it is on console, you could actually activate it. So I throw it up and I tap it again and it just activates right there. Imagine like sniping ferrets out of the sky or echoes out of the sky. That would provide such a cool little detail. That would be super fun to play with. It'd be a shame that if we weren't able to do that at some point in time. Because I just feel like so many of his Omnic form abilities and just his abilities in general really ring hollow. Moving on to Reinhardt. Reinhardt has a lot of things that need to be worked on with him as well. One of the little details that somebody brought up, which I didn't really think was a big deal, but I think it's probably worth putting in, is Pin should do full damage to turrets, whether it's Illari turret or Torbjorn turret. We actually tested it. It only stuns the turret, but it does actually 0 damage to the turret, which makes no sense whatsoever. I feel like it should stun and do damage to the turret at the same time. If I commit that powerful of an ability on a turret, it should do full damage. It's anchored in the ground, so it makes sense that having something that powerful slamming into it would do a lot of damage to it. Obviously, Shatter consistency. I think Shatter is definitely, it's obviously Shatter is super inconsistent. Hasn't been inconsistent since Overwatch 1. Sometimes goes through payload, sometimes doesn't. Sometimes goes up, sometimes goes down, sometimes goes too high, sometimes just doesn't hit anything for no reason whatsoever. Pin consistency as well. So I've talked about how like left shoulder sucks people and right shoulder tends to boop them. I think the major problem is actually the hitbox of the pin is a little bit misleading. He kind of extends out wide on the right side, so it makes it look like right side is basically the hitbox is consistent, but it doesn't look like it's lined up. For example, if you look at my head actually kind of stays in the middle, but more of my mass is on the right, so it tends to lead people to aim too far right, and that means a lot of pins are missed. So I'm not sure if that needs to shift his body when he pins. I'm honestly not sure what the solution is there, but it definitely makes a lot of people miss the hitbox. There's also a weird bug. I don't know if I can actually replicate it here, where you can cancel pin into an ultimate. I did it on stream when we were discussing these things, and where you cancel pin and then use your shatter or use fire strikes, and there's no animation for the shatter or for the fire strikes. I don't know if I can replicate it. Maybe I can do it. No, I can't. So anyway, you can cancel your pin into a shatter and then throw fire strikes, and your hammer literally stands still, and the fire strikes just appear. So it's a bit of a weird bug. I was able to replicate on stream. I've done it a few times, so something to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if anybody else has had that. Consistency with Orisa interactions. Maybe javelin spin, booping can be a little bit weird. I think also we've seen times, maybe it's a latency thing where Orisas will pop fortify mid-pin at the start of the pin, which should never, ever, ever happen. And then also I think pin should really be 250 damage, and I really feel like shatter should just be a 200 damage one shot as well. Again, net buffs for sure, but it just makes sense. I don't see any other reason why it wouldn't be. Sigma, again, net buff. I think in general, I know we talk about like one shots in the game not being something that Blizzard necessarily wants all the time, but I think if there's anything, having Sigma Rock into primary fire is one of the most earned and mechanically skilled one shots in the game, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be there. One quality of life change as well that would be more of a buff is, I wonder if there would be a way, is it balanced for him to be able to cancel his kinetic grasp, be able to tap it again and cancel the animation, get the HP that I generated at that point in time, and then just end the cooldown right there. That would feel amazing. That would give you a lot more flexibility about how you can like duel and counterplay with this character. Again, I think canceling animations whenever you want to is something that's going to come up frequently. I think it's probably worth considering. Maybe it'll be too broken. I'm not sure. Winston, I think Winston's mostly fine. I think, one of the things that we talk about with Winston is maybe his right click, maybe even his primary fire could do a little bit more damage versus deployables like turrets. That would be a huge quality of life change and a buff versus some of his worst enemies, and Illari turrets, Torgrim turrets, things like that. But I also think as well that the right click can be a little bit controversial as well. One of the things that's weird about the right click, I think I'm not even saying that this is necessarily something they want to change, but they recently buffed its animation delay, so it charges a lot faster. But they made it so that there's more of a delay between shooting again. You see that delay? And there's also a delay between me right-clicking again. Now, the reason they did that is they made it more viable to right-click in certain circumstances, but also that delay between that right-click and left-click can feel kind of bad. So I think one of the things with Winston is they might need to do some more tweaks, maybe talk with some real good Winston mates about what would be the best way to make that weapon swap between right-click and left-click feel a little bit better while still allowing you to right-click. Because the old right-click charged so slowly that oftentimes it was not viable in certain burst combos, and now that it's more viable, can we make it feel a little bit better? Wrecking Ball. Okay, there's a lot to say with Wrecking Ball. Yeatle made a great video about the death of Wrecking Ball, and one of the things he brought up that would be just a nice quality of life change is just not being body blocked by tiny little heroes. If you've ever played Wrecking Ball before, you've had this experience, right, where it's like bouncing around, and it's like, look at how big I am, and look at how small you are. How is this even possible? And that's a huge, huge problem when it comes to developing momentum with Wrecking Ball, moving around the map, getting body blocked. I think in general, I'm not sure exactly what the solution here is, but maybe a tiny, tiny, tiny boop, just really disrupting people when you're rolling through them, especially if they're squishy characters. It would be a huge quality of life change for this. Another little detail that I thought of, maybe this wouldn't be too broken, but one of the problems with Wrecking Ball right now is the only relevant people to boop right now are squishies. With the tank passive, it's actually really impossible to get any sort of value out of disrupting the tanks. And basically that removes one entire target out of the potential people that Wrecking Ball can engage on. So could Wrecking Ball's grapple ignore the tank passive, or would that be too broken? Not really sure. I think one of the things as well, again, buff for this character as well, a general consensus amongst Wrecking Ball mains is if there was some way for adaptive shields to give you less HP, but give you some sort of CC immunity or CC resistance, maybe it's something that a lot of tanks need, but especially Wrecking Ball, I think that would be a huge quality of life change. Again, we're talking about net buffs at this point, honestly, with this character. Some people were saying maybe it reduced mine application by 0.1 seconds. I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I think mine's generally a fine ultimate, but probably worth mentioning up. Also, interrupting reload while changing form. So if I shoot, reload, and I change form, it interrupts the reload, which is really annoying. And you see that if I don't give myself enough time in ball form, it doesn't automatically reload for me. That's a bit of a quality of life change that'd be nice. And another question as well is, maybe this is a little bit corny, but should hack cancel ball form? One of the things about Sombra hack is that it cancels things, like it'll put Bob to sleep, or it will cancel certain ultimates. But it's pretty inconsistent. Anything that's a transformation ultimate with that timer in the middle, Orisa, I believe Ramatra's Nemesis form as well, Bastion's form as well. All of these have timers, right? But Wrecking Ball even though it's technically not really a cooldown, see in the bottom there, there's no cooldown whatsoever. It cancels my ball form. So I'm not, again, a net buff versus this character, but it might be something to consider here. So basically a lot of ideas I've kind of thrown out with Wrecking Ball right there. A lot of them really just are net buffs. I think we need to be careful about incorporating too many of those things, but I'm curious to hear what y'all's thoughts are in the comments. Zarya right click, you can obviously move yourself pretty quickly and get some pretty nice verticality. Now, my chat was like, oh, you can't right click while you're bubbled, but so you can see like I'm not booping myself, but it's actually, you can right click yourself if you right click inside the bubble. Watch this. You see that? You see that little boop there? So I'm not jumping. I could go even higher if I jumped. Wait. There you go. But I think that would be something nice. You can only right-click yourself while you're like actually inside the bubble, which is a little bit frustrating. And I think one of the nice quality of life changes for Zarya is to maybe increase the hitbox of that where that's possible, just so that while you are bubbling yourself, there's actually a little bit more mobility options. Just a tiny little tweak, nothing super serious. Now, let's move on to the supports here. Now, supports definitely needed some quality of life tweaks. Let's start off with Ana. Again, this is going to be a net nerf. More balanced than anything else, but I do think nade duration on tanks needs to be a lot shorter. I believe right now it's 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds. Somebody in chat correct me, but I think we could reduce that by a full half a second, maybe even a full second. I don't really see a reason why nade, which is already pretty effective on tanks and pretty easy to land on tanks, should be as effective as it is on landing on squishies. Also, this is more of an Overwatch 2 bug, but it definitely disproportionately affects Ana, is the cooldowns disappearing on death if they're projectiles. Sleep dart, nade, if you get killed while those are out traveling, they just disappear. Really, really, really quite frustrating. I know it's like when I hit a great sleep dart, I hit a great nade, I could see it happening, and then I died in that 0 split second. It's like, hey, I don't even think it's necessarily a latency thing, because there's a lot of times where it was definitely more than my latency afterwards, and it still was an issue. So something to look into. That pretty simple. Lamp interactions with texture. Everyone hates the bounce lamp. We've all had that happen if you've played a lot of Baptiste. A lot of situations, different maps. Maybe more of a map problem, but we need to take a look about situations where that lamp is bouncing when it shouldn't. Same thing with bash. There's some super bash things that you can do. I don't know if I can do it there. No, okay. So there's like different ways where you can catch a lip and you can bash yourself up to high ground and do different things like that. It's a pretty cool little skill expression of the character. Super inconsistent spots. I want to take a look at that one as well. Some people were also like, they would like an inspire indicator. So you can kind of see that little yellow pulse. But that's not always super obvious for the people using it, for newer players. So maybe there could be an option that you can enable for that. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't want UI. The game is visually confusing enough as it is. And the last thing is you actually notice that there's a slight delay between actually pressing shield and actually shielding. Reinhardt can do the insta shields, right? He can do the, you can kind of see it. I'm tapping, right? 0 frame shields, right? Brig can't do that. Brig has a slight application time, which makes things like blocking shatters or blocking abilities a little bit trickier. That would definitely be a buff that she would benefit from, introducing a little bit of extra skill in the character. Illari, better sound cue on shots. This might be a hot take for some of you guys, but I don't find that near as satisfying as some of the other sound cues. So not exactly a quality of life, but just a little nitpick for me. One thing that you guys might not be aware of with Illari is the amount that the damage in the healing. You notice that my damage is not regenerating. So healing does not allow your damage to regenerate. However, if I heal and then damage, my healing regenerates. That's a bit annoying here. So it prevents Illari from being able to balance her abilities as much. And if there was something about like, oh, well, there's only so much solar energy that you can have, that would make sense if it was consistent between either healing and damaging healing, but it's not. Really, it only disproportionately affects damaging. And then it gets even worse. I actually had somebody pull up an Illari melee animation to see if she was using solar energy, and it didn't look like she was, because if you melee, you do not regenerate solar energy. Look at that. It pauses every melee. And so I don't know why this is a thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. I know some people were like, well, it prevents one-shot combos and this and that. But honestly, why are you playing point-blank range in Illari? There's no character in the game that punishes you that hard for meleeing. And I see no reason why it should be. Now, I can understand people in the comments might be like, well, you can't reload for a lot of characters while you're meleeing. So it just makes sense for a character that doesn't have to reload. But to be honest with you, that just seems a little bit arbitrary. It's consistent with the game mechanics, maybe, but it doesn't necessarily, we don't need consistent game mechanics. We can just balance things. If it's fun, great. If it's not fun, if it's balanced, great. Not every character has to be. I know Overwatch has this obsession with consistency, but sometimes consistency isn't as intuitive as I think they think it is. We already have a character that skips the reload system. What doesn't skip the reload system? Actually, it doesn't skip the reload system. So you know what? Screw off. Okay, Kiriko. TP fix. I mean, there's nothing other to be said. TPing through the map is ridiculous. TPing going off and actually not TPing is ridiculous. I think some of the force reload and healing sometimes can be a little bit awkward as well. So if you run out of healing, like it can force reload. And then the last one would be I think this is again a buff or a nerf thing. I don't feel like Suzu should both cleanse and make you invulnerable and heal you and make you intangible. In other words, people go right through you. It really needs to be maybe 3 out of those 4. I would say probably the cleanse, heal, and maybe the invulnerability, but the intangibility is really unnecessary. And I also think that honestly, you could probably get away with just the cleanse and the heal. I think that alone would be enough of value. But yeah, I think too many things going for Kiriko, and this is more about quality of life for the enemy team. Now Lifeweaver, I could go make an entire video about Lifeweaver quality of life. Pull is super inconsistent. It runs into objects way too much, which ruins the entire reason you play the character. But one of the things that is definitely annoying is that pedal versus the grab interaction feels like you could literally just use pedal to completely counteract the grab. I don't feel like that should be the case. Life grip pull out a grab, understandable, but pedal is too low of a cooldown for that to function as it is. I do think if you do pedal grab, you should pull the grab up with it and not necessarily pull them out of the grab. And then in terms of a buff for this character, I feel like charging and having to reload your heals is too much. I feel like you should either have to charge or you shouldn't have to worry about reloading and charging up your heals. Now you might argue, oh, well, he already does too much healing. I hate this character. Screw this character. Yes, balance side of things. We don't necessarily need to make the character miserable to play just because it's unfair. If we were to do this, then we could reduce the healing numbers to actually make the character feel better and maybe be a little bit more balanced. Lucio, not a whole lot. Some people were like, yo, we should give him 4 more ammo so he can shoot another shot. Sure, I guess. I think backwards wall riding is one of those settings that should be on by default. This is not on by default for new players, so that's probably something, just a little tweak that should be put in. Mercy is another one where I can make an entire video off of her. In fact, Cassidy has an amazing video on GA bugs, just bugs in general, which I highly recommend you checking out. I think maybe more of a visual indicator for damage boost with the crosshair ticky, like you did in Overwatch 1. I think movement reversion to Overwatch, to early Overwatch 2 or Overwatch 1. Certainly the earlier versions of Overwatch 2 had more consistent movement. That one's a bit more controversial. But one of the biggest things is just consistency with GA. It dies a lot of the times mid-activation for no reason. The LOS bug checks out. Sometimes it checks in and then you start the GA and then it cancels. I also find that the super jump, you see how the super jump cooldown just starts right now? Sometimes it starts sooner. Apparently there's some settings that you can tweak that definitely can affect that, but for the most part, it's just inconsistent. Let me see if I can actually get a slingshot here. I'm bad at this game. Oh, no. But yeah, I think Mercy is another one where there's a multitude of bugs, and some of those are probably more of a priority, especially GA, because that's just how she moves. Moira, I didn't have as much with Moira. Zenyatta, give me back my Discord range. It is actually insanity that this is one of the worst balance changes that Overwatch 2 has ever done. Not because it has this dramatically negative effect on the game, necessarily. It just feels terrible, and it was completely meaningless. It's like kicking a dog. There's no reason for it. Nobody's going to die from that, but it's just so cruel. And the Discord range never addressed the initial problem with Discord, which was discording tanks. Tanks don't play this far away from Zenyatta most of the time, so it just meant that people discorded tanks more. And when you're trying to duel people at range, which Zenyatta should be good at, it actually is a huge nerf, and it's really, really difficult to play. I still mash E at range because somehow my muscle memory is like, you need to be able to Discord at range. It's terrible. It's really, really ridiculous that they actually made that change here. Just one of the worst changes I think Overwatch 2 has ever made because it was just so out of touch, Anyway, Ashe. Somebody was saying, maybe somebody in the comments can clarify in this if you played Ashe, that sometimes dynamite into shooting, there's like a no rec, like there's no shot. I'm honestly not sure if that's an actual case or not, but something worth putting out here. Also, I think Bob's spawn issues are a little bit weird. Maybe it's just an aspect of skill with the character, but the fact that Bob spawns so high up and over your head can definitely lead to some issues where he gets caught on something. It might be a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more consistent if he spawned a little bit closer to the Ashe, just so it would lead to more accurate placement. Bastion, no self-grenade damage. I think this character is definitely busted, but the fact that his one utility and mobility you damage yourself on it, feels like really bad. I think if we're going to fix this character, I think that needs to go as well. Cassidy, what is this ability? Again, there wasn't as much obviously the low-hanging fruit is like, what the frick is that ability? But also, what is this ability anymore? It's so inconsistent. It's either complete cheese, somehow manages to work on a tank and makes you feel super cheesed out, but 99.9% of the time, it's literally not even used. So I think Cassidy as a whole right now has a major identity crisis, and really both Fan the Hammer and Sticky just feel absolutely terrible. And they also don't have no idea what they're doing with the role either. I won't even get into that. Echo, I think consistency with what lasts after copy. So one of the awkward things here is that there's certain abilities, like Nano Boost, I believe, immediately disappears. I think Torbjorn ult immediately disappears as well. But then there's certain things like Bob that lasts after your copy expires. So there's a lot of inconsistency with what lasts after your ult copy expires. So like, let's say you build up a Nano Boost and then it immediately just goes away, or Torvald immediately goes away. So I think some consistency with that would be very, very helpful because it's not consistent. Genji, Hanzo, both wall climb. There's probably bugs, especially with Genji, that you could make entire videos on, but I know that in Overwatch 2, I had a significantly harder time. I grinded a lot of Genji initially in Overwatch 2, and man, I had a hard time wall climbing on places that I used to be able to wall climb. Like that right there, like I'm walking up and I'm holding spacebar, and it just catches and doesn't go. Like it is so inconsistent and so frustrating. That probably applies to Kiriko as well, and I don't know what they changed. I don't know if I just now started paying attention to it, but yeah. Junkrat, I think forcing vertical movement with the concussive mines is kind of annoying. So every concussive mine, even if you put it like super laterally, will jump you up instead of horizontally, which kind of limits your movement, and it reduces some of the skill ceiling to the character where you could have a lot more movement flexibility if it actually bumped you in the direction that you should go. It forces you to go up. May, I think they revert the M1? Yeah, I think they reverted the M1 recently, so maybe May is not as much. I definitely think that maybe they need to take a look at her ultimate, but again, that's definitely encroaching on the balance side of things. Pharah, maybe be able to cancel her ultimate. I know they're doing some tweaks on Pharah, so I think we should kind of reserve judgment on what to do with Pharah, but being able to cancel your ultimate would be a nice change. Reaper, I mean, there's so many options with Reaper. I think faster TP animation, just even a little bit faster would be really, really great. Being able to cancel your ultimate would be really, really, really great. Consistency with footsteps would be really, really, really great. Sojourn, probably okay. I think still relying so much on her railgun or her mouse one spread still feels really, really bad. That's something that I've wished they've changed since the beginning. I wish they leaned more into her mobility and her mouse one and a little bit less into the rail. I think that'd be fun for everybody involved, especially with the unique aspects of her mobility, but oh well. I think Soldier's probably okay. Sombra, way too soon. I think one of the things I don't like with the new Sombra is that there's really inconsistency with your translocator. Sometimes you'll clip through doorways. Sometimes you'll literally go through walls. So I'll like throw my translocator here and I'll clap that, right? But there's also a lot of spawn rooms where I'll throw my translocator and it will catch, like I'll get caught on the ceiling. Or I'll throw it through a door frame and I think I hit the door frame, but it teleports me in the opposite side of the door frame. So it definitely feels like there's a lot of really weird interactions with this character. But I think we just focus on that one for right now. Symmetra, some folks are like saying maybe the deployables shouldn't be destroyed by payload, kind of similar like how Bob or Tree kind of phases through. Mostly fine. Torbjorn, nah. Tracer, I think the same thing as Ana, losing pulse bombs when you die could be a little bit annoying. Also, when you grab, like you will be low HP, grab a health pack, and then recall, and then sometimes you'll go back to a lower HP than you were after you grabbed the health pack, which makes no sense. You should recall to the highest health that you had in the last 3 seconds, not the lowest that you had. And then the last one is, I think, decreasing the sound on Venomine. Venomine sounds like a freaking cannon going off, which really is not great because it's already arguably the weakest ability in the game. But then giving away your position as heavily as it does sounds and feels really bad. So I think consistency with like Venomine noise, maybe making it more quieter, just so that you can actually use it without being punished more often than you actually get the value out of it. But yeah, that's all I have. I know I missed some stuff. I know I probably over-prioritized some stuff, and I know some of you guys are going to disagree with what I put in here. So please let me know what I missed in the comments. I am not a GM plus character on every hero. I can coach every character at a high level, but I don't know the tiny little nuances and bugs and difficulties that you might be struggling with on people that play the character a lot more than me. So let me know what I missed in the comments. Let's hope and pray that somebody at Blizzard watches this, and even just a few of these changes go through, I think the game would feel a lot more consistent and a lot more fun to play. Let me know what you think in the comments, as I said, and enjoy the rest of the day.